I would say for everybody who does tune into these, like, um, tell me a little bit about yourself again, and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Sebastian. I look after business development here at fatsecret. I've been here for 13 years, and we are operating the largest verified nutrition database globally. So we provide access to verified nutrition data on a per country basis, and we power the majority of health, fitness, wellness, wearable applications out there. And more recently, a lot of the medical, pharmaceutical, and AI related application as it pertains to nutrition.
Yeah, it's we did a podcast a while back and invited you back because these are just conversations and I love checking in with folks. And um one of the things I thought about you several times since we talked, because I've kind of gone down the full AI rabbit hole. And as someone who has a lot of uh content, valuable data that I've accumulated over 15 years, I wanted to understand this space pretty deeply before I thought about how I move forward or shut things down because I'm irrelevant anymore, or I don't know. Like there was a lot of concerns going around in my head. So you had started dabbling in and playing around in this world. So I would love to catch up. I mean, for everybody who's listening, I mean, you guys have a wealth of data, a wealth of valuable data, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. So tell me about like where you guys at now.
Very good question. That's probably the biggest the biggest talking point and what we spend most of our time on, understanding how this new world of AI affects someone who owns proprietary data at scale globally, data that is often unique, that only we have, and what do you do with it? And can you make it work, or are you just going under it because you're being scraped and people ingest your data, take it, and they run, and you'll never see them again, and you'll never see your data again. But for context, we started this back in '09, so 2006, sorry, '06, 20 years ago. And initially we started this operation because back in '06 there was no verified nutrition data out there. There was no API. APIs barely existed in '06. There was no one trying to verify and publish nutrition data at scale. It didn't exist. So we simply had to build it ourselves, given there was no such solution out there. And the initial promise we had, or premise we had back in '06 was, when Zuck started Facebook and when MySpace was around, we tried to build the same sort of concept, meaning a social network, but for dieting. So we wanted to help people lose weight more effectively and help each other build a community, build a social network, what others built, in the music space with MySpace, and obviously Zuck in the college space, and later on for everyone around the world. So we tried to tackle this niche of nutrition, and given nutrition data wasn't there to be tapped into, we built it ourselves. And as you said, in 2023, when the big AI rush came to surface, we were really concerned. We were very, very concerned. We didn't know what this would mean. Would we lose our edge? Would people literally take our data and run? Would we have a business in 3 years' time? We were highly concerned. Yeah, and fast forward 3 years, things are fine. Things are well, and we've managed to keep our edge. Some of the AI providers, come and talk to us and work with us, and they tap into our solutions. And there's probably a few things that have happened as part of the AI sort of revolution. One is all the vibe coding out there. Like anyone can build their app now. If you want to build an app for whatever, if you want to have your own little e-game for car racing, if you want a nutrition app, if you want whatever type of app you want these days, you can build it with all the modern day agentic coding tools within 1, 3, 2 days, whatever it may be. However, it also then requires a lot of these vibe coding enterprises to have some sort of back engine that can safely and reliably power their nutrition content if they deal with any medical, any health, any fitness or nutrition related offerings. And they often come to us. So we see a lot of these younger enterprises come to us, but at the same time, we see that all the large big corporate solutions that are out there, from pharmaceuticals to wearables and adjacent wearables, they are progressing way faster. Obviously, all their developers have access to these amazing tools, so they can ship stuff more quickly, but also they can internationalize and translate more quickly. Back in the days, 10 years ago, you needed a translation agency, possibly if you wanted to scale and go into other markets, and you had to localize your app and stuff, which now happens so rapidly given the high quality translation capabilities that the big and modern day LLMs have, which also helps all the large enterprises scale much faster than back in the days. And as part of this AI revolution, we also see, I think, a drastic innovation in the medical space. So there's a lot of medical technology that's being enhanced, that's now offered to consumers, from CGMs to all the rings to beyond just continuous glucose monitoring, but blood pressure monitoring and all these adjacent tracking devices, not just your steps. 10 years ago, we all started tracking our steps, or even 15 years ago, we started tracking our steps, and everyone had a Fitbit and all the watches out there. But more recently, there's more profound medical data that is now being tracked from the everyday consumer in such a simple fashion that then helps both small and large enterprises build these medical adjacent apps. And most of these apps will have some component of nutrition. Obviously, we're dealing with fitness, with sleep, with stress and or recovery, but then nutrition always usually is up in that conversation as well. So whenever someone requires verified nutrition data, they come to us, and as part of the sort of 20-year history, we've been very fortunate that we've been getting a lot of love from Google. Admittedly, we've had very good rankings in all the local search algorithms, but more recently, that simply translates into your LLM queries. If you ask any of your favorite LLMs and you need to tap into a nutrition solution, usually they simply spit out fatsecret, which is something we're very fortunate for. And as such, the broader developer world out there that needs anything to do with nutrition, thankfully at this stage, they come to us. And then completely unrelated to that, we've been able to utilize AI as well, obviously, at scale, and we've built various solutions. Happy to run into and run through any of these. I believe last time we spoke, it's been 2 years, over 2 years. I feel like it's old news, but I believe we hadn't even launched any of these offerings back when we last spoke.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question, is like, how do you guys use AI, particularly internally, and to kind of evolve what you're doing, and what sort of solutions have you evolved or launched?
Yep. So going back 10 years, for the last 10 years, our single most requested feature for our API was image recognition. So the majority of clients we had and developers came to us, they were all looking for image recognition technology, where you could say simply take a photo of your plate, it would scan it, it would identify all the food objects, the non-food objects, and determine what's in your, what's on your plate, what's in your meal. And we tried to build our own solution. We had our own dedicated machine learning team starting back in 2016, and there were some larger corporates that tried to do the same, and we worked with some of them as well, and we shared a lot of knowledge. But at the end of the day, no one had a cutting edge. No one could really nail it. It was so difficult using traditional computer vision and machine learning technologies to build a reliable image recognition engine at scale. And come 2023, ChatGPT launches, the world goes bananas, and it's just there. So it basically, everything that we and many other companies had built for 10 years or more was useless. Anything you had built, deployed, and worked on so hard and invested so much money and time in was completely useless, because it could never match these modern day, wonders of the world that are the LLMs. So that was somewhat sad, but somewhat a massive opportunity, because at that point in time, we could start building our own image recognition engine on top of these LLMs and deliver it much faster at scale, meaning we cover 26 languages at the moment. So we need to ensure that everything we do is multilingual and works for all our clients in every country and language. So someone could be, using, say, Portuguese language in the US, and that has to work. Or someone could be using French language in Belgium, and that has to work. So any of these region language combinations is something that we try and cover for all of our offerings, both for food search, image recognition, and I can touch on natural language processing in a second as well. But all these global applicable solutions, they need to be solid, they need to be robust, and that was really challenging for us pre-AI. And I feel like it's getting much easier and much better. And what that means is in 2024, I think mid-late 2024, I think it was just after we had caught up, we were able to launch this image recognition engine, which effectively looks at a meal and can determine obviously the objects in that photo together with what's a food and a non-food object. And then we go and match every food ingredient and its weight against the verified nutrition data set of that user. So if a user is say in the UK, and they take a plate of their, say they take a photo of their plate and we identify everything that's there, we can then safely match it against the foods in the UK database, which is where the user is at. So meaning if there was a restaurant food, say a KFC or, McDonald's or, you name it, if that was what they consumed, we can safely match it against the restaurant menu items in that country. Same goes for any branded objects, whether it's a Starbucks or a Mars bar, which is obviously simple, but there's much more difficult use cases out there, and then anything that is generic or composite generic. So what we try to do is in every country that we operate, which again at this stage is 62, we try and cover the single food generics, the composite generics, the branded foods, and the restaurant foods, and that then taps into the output for the image recognition solution. And the same logic is what we applied for natural language processing. So natural language processing would allow a user to type the entire meal or simply speak into the phone and say, hey, for breakfast, I had a bowl of cereal, a banana, an apple, a cappuccino, done. Which is obviously much, much simpler than historically having to track and log every single item, find it in the database, find the serving size, etc. So that has been tremendously helpful in reducing user friction. As we know, keeping track of what you're eating is super tedious. No one wants to do it. A lot of friction. It's not fun. At the end of the day, it's not fun having to track all your foods, but we understand there's medical benefit in doing it both for weight loss and for many other adjacent use cases, from chronic disease management, obesity management, diabetes, etc., etc. So we know that there is a requirement for many people around the planet to track their nutrition more thoroughly, and we try and build the best tools, reducing friction and making it as seamless as possible, both for the user and for the developers as well, having to build this and making it available via their app. So that's sort of one good use case where we started off 2.5 years ago, using AI when it was first there, and since we've been able to use it internally to improve our processes. We usually go, our day-to-day operation is a lot about looking at nutrition data, verifying it, and then publishing it. And when we publish it, we can touch on that as well, as you pointed out earlier, publishing any such rich proprietary content on the web now has a lot of challenges these days. But obviously we publish it in our own mobile app and our API for that matter in real time. So all these processes are heavily now supported by the use of AI, while we technically can never rely on any output from an LLM. So we could never ask an LLM for a given, nutritional information. That's not something we have ever done, and we will never do, simply because there's hallucinations, there's bias, there's large inconsistencies actually in LLMs outside the US, meaning we know that a lot of the training data for the big LLMs was English speaking, so English language, and US based, or sort of US based and Western centric content. So whenever you're looking outside the US and outside English language, the reliability and the confidence levels of most large LLMs drop significantly. So given we operate at scale globally, we can't really rely on these outputs by any means. And as such, while we can use AI to enhance our processes and work better and work smarter and more efficiently, we can't use it for our core operation, which is verifying nutrition data and publishing it. Unfortunately, and maybe that will get better over time. I'm not sure, to be honest, but that's at least where we're at right now. And now there's many other adjacent data points that we're launching, from a new recipe database that we started building, to a meal planning API, to something really dynamic where we can build customized meal plans by an API, which is first off. There's really no meal planning API out there that would let you build customized, dynamic meal plans based off verified nutrition content. Hasn't been built and doesn't exist to date. So very excited get that off the ground later this year, and then yeah, I mean, sky's the limit. There's so much to be done, so much to do. But I'm sure you have a lot of other questions.
Yeah. This sounds like a nice balance between deterministic and non-deterministic, knowing where it works and where it doesn't, and finding that balance. But when I'm talking to folks, I come across generally two groups. Like people, you're similar to you. Success story is like, hey, we were able to kind of adapt and defend our previous business model in this current market. B, we were able to use AI in ways, and we're finding the balance. We're still experimenting and generally successful, and a positive outcome. And then others are still really struggling. And the kind of what I'm hearing is the difference is where they were at in their API journey overall when they came into this AI game. And would you say your guys' investment in your API over the years has kind of set the table, unintended, for where you guys are at?
I think so to some extent, and the fact that we try to build everything on at a global scale. So if you know, modern day conversation is always around moats. Can you build a moat around your business? And having a niche offering, is a bit of a threat in itself if you just deal with one tiny component. For us, it's nutrition, but we try to at least tackle nutrition at a global scale. So we tried, to build something that will work across all these languages in all these countries, and together with the investment, as you rightfully said, that we've made into our API, that's probably the reason why we're still here. At least why we still have a B2B facing business, aside from our consumer facing offering that we still run as well. But yeah, the investment into the API and then the innovation that comes with it. So all these opportunities that AI has provided us with, we've tried to tackle, head on, and we try to build an adjacent solution and build on top of our existing offering. And we knew that if we wouldn't have innovated the way we did 2 years ago, we might not be here today. That is a fair assumption. But yeah, the moat itself, and for us, the moat is again the global scale and the global reach. If we didn't have that, I think we wouldn't be talking here today. Yeah, yeah, very much
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that the APIs allowed that reach too, not just technically in dealing with the technical issues with AI, but your APIs help you kind of grow your business over the years and spread around the globe. Now, you talked about your, B2B and B2C, and you mentioned earlier about vibe coding and your guys' own mobile apps. So how are you having to shift to kind of address this? Is the vibe coding thing generally a positive for how you guys seeing more API consumers, more business to it? How are you kind of addressing that shift?
Yeah. So for our platform API, what happened due to the shift in vibe coding? I would say the number of developers that sign up to our API every day has gone almost 100x. It is pretty crazy. The amount of traffic we're getting and the amount of interest and inbound we're getting is mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing how many people are now capable and enabled to build their own health, fitness, wellness, nutrition related app. That is not something we had anticipated, by any means. And we've built additional tools. We've built like a self-serve checkout, if you want, where people can come to our API. They can, use a Stripe subscription and they can just get started. They don't need to send an email. They don't need to contact anyone. It's all sort of plug and play. It's all working for them. They can use image recognition, NLP. They get their API keys themselves. It's fully, self-managed. So we try to improve all these workflows. Probably around 2 years ago, when we saw this coming, we slowly started seeing the increase, and we realized, we are a bootstrapped company. We've been doing this for 20 years. We've been profitable for 20 years. We've never raised money. We've never had venture funding. So we operate, still in a bootstrapped manner. And we realized if our traffic goes 10x, which we somewhat thought it might go, we cannot cope, with this influx of interest. Now, we did not anticipate it to go close to 100x. So we started building automation as part of our, developer support processes, and thankfully um, they happen to work, and thankfully we were able to sort of meet that demand. But demand hasn't slowed down. Like in, it started roughly 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Demand started spiking, and the biggest increase in developer interest was actually when we launched image recognition. So it turned out that this demand for image recognition, which we knew from our existing developer base was large and was growing and had been there for 10 years, the moment we launched this image recognition API roughly 2 years ago, I believe it was mid 2024, traffic spiked again massively. So this whole vibe coding era that we live in at the moment, and it might go the other way, possibly in a few years' time, who knows, was incredible to see, and it's still happening. And there's some very nuanced sub trends that have emerged from not just people building vibe coding an app that they put on the App Store or put on Google Play. People can now build and host their own application. There's a very famous GitHub project out there, Sparky Fitness. I know you're very active on GitHub and you're very familiar with all the API and self-hosted solutions out there. There's a project called Sparky Fitness where anyone can just host their own nutrition app by downloading a GitHub repository and running it on their phone locally. And there's tens of thousands of people doing it. So you don't rely on any mobile app provider. You don't really rely on the App Store or Google Play anymore. And you can self-host your own little application, and you can enhance it. You can track not just your fitness, your health. You can track whatever you want. And you can tap into verified sources such as us, which is just an amazing development to see, which is, again, not something I believe anyone would have forecasted 2 years ago, how the world is changing for anyone who is just slightly tech savvy. You don't need to be a seasoned backend developer by any means, or you don't need to be a native iOS or Android developer. You can now build, host, and run your own application that only lives on your phone, that with the data that you control. You're not sharing anything with any marketing providers. There's no marketing pixels implemented. It's just you running your own little solution, storing and hosting everything yourself. And that is mind blowing to see how that part of the whole vibe coding shift is happening, that hardly anyone talks about, to be honest.
I'm super interested in that kind of that new level of app distribution, app because you hear about, I think, Lovable and these other ones that are, but not the kind of privacy first, low impact kind of, open source ways of doing these things. And then I think bringing together the best of breed SaaS or headless SaaS, I would say. fatsecret is you guys have your own apps and you have that B2C, but because you're API first and you kind of have that API layer, you guys can be headless and kind of power these movements as well. And they can, these app developers with these ideas can bring these things together and kind of plant the seeds for these ecosystems across different industries. And that's what I'm really enjoying talking to people right now about across different industries. Real estate, shipping and logistics is that kind of federation and redistribution of the application layer. But APIs are still super core, super important, and part of it. So I love that. That's really cool to hear. I don't want to dominate. Just, I mean, I can keep asking you questions. I like this to be a two-way street. Anything I can answer or share or talk about, or you got any questions for me that are top of mind?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because you're so seasoned and experienced with APIs, what have you seen sort of in the last 2 years? I know it's been a while since we last spoke. That has blown your mind, that you didn't anticipate popping up on the surface, and it's continued to run and operate really really well, that you didn't foresee by any means.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, the number of APIs is just like through the roof. Like, I mean, it's impossible for me to keep track of what the different APIs are out there and what's going on. And so I have to use AI to understand that. and to crawl, to suggest things, to find things and profile them. And I have a search engine called APIs.io that I list them, and I'm publishing usually about 5 to 700 new APIs a week. And it's just insane to keep track of. And so I've had to start rating them and kind of to understand where they're at. But I'm trying to quantify the programmability of these APIs, because of the kind of the agentic shift in what's going on. And so for me, you know, I'm I'm less excited about AI. I'm having to use it every day, and I use it. I have lots of concerns about AI environmentally, IP, a lot of the same concerns I know you guys have. But it's here. I'm using it and trying to use it to make sense of the world. And I've always been with APIs, I've always been a big proponent of, automated onboarding. How do you sign, how do you discover, how do you onboard, how do you use APIs effectively with low developer overhead? So having to write code, to do things, and that should be as automated and programmable as possible. And so I see AI as being an opportunity to kind of get what I've always seen with APIs is this should be you should be able to use not just one or two APIs or five APIs effectively. You should be able to use 20 or 30 or 200 APIs effectively and not have to be an expert in any one of those. And so that's kind of this shift that I see the positiveness in the API sprawl. The massive number of APIs is the ones that I think are going to be programmable, are going to kind of float to the top, and the ones that are truly useful, the ones that aren't exploitive and extractive, the ones that have a clear business model and have a business model that is, I think, equitable amongst developers and isn't just exploitative in that way, I think are going to do the best. So.
Right, right. And what are your thoughts on um, AI slop as it pertains to APIs? Have you seen much of that? Because that's something I'm sort of struggling with, or what I'm seeing out there. There's obviously there's AI slop on the consumer side. Someone just, vibe codes an app within 2 days, puts it out there, and then a lot of the content and a lot of functionality is basic, to say the least,
Yeah.
possibly dangerous if it's health related, if it's a
Yeah.
health related application. And then I'm starting to see the same on the API side of things out there where a new shiny fancy looking API pops up, but again, it was vibe coded within 48 hours, no guardrails, no security concerns or considerations. I'm seeing that a lot now. And have you seen anything on that front?
Yeah. I mean, I was overwhelmed, to be honest. I think when did we last talk? I think I was working at Bloomberg Media here in New York City, and I'd gotten back to API Evangelist, and I was overwhelmed. I didn't think I was relevant anymore. I was like, it's just noisy. And, it was 6 to 8 months of just noise. It's super noisy trying to understand what's going on. And I didn't have any way of making sense of it. Now I kind of have this rating system that I'm using to kind of cut through the noise. And I use Claude pretty heavily to help me kind of make sense of what's coming in. And it's helping me kind of refine and understand. Now I'm going to have to work hard to keep ahead because I'm finding some people are really savvy at gaming the system and being able, like you said, put out that polished looking API that's like, wow, this looks great. It checks a lot of the boxes, and they're able to do it real fast, especially because I open source my rating system. They can just basically feed my rating system to their AI and say, make it meet this. So I have to stay ahead of the game. But this is where I see um domain expertise, standards, regulation, quality certification, like other. So I'm really identifying standards and regulations country by country, and adding those as additive layers. So if you're in a specific industry, what are the certifications? What are the other ways that you can kind of validate that you care and you're doing the work? And so I'm rapidly putting that together. And I'll dive more into kind of Fat Secret and kind of and share what I find, as far as the snapshot of what you guys are offering, how you guys fit in each of the do Australia, do UK, do US, do Canada, and then start going to others and and have that overall picture of what Fat Secret does, but then each individual country. And because I feel like people like you guys who care about the data, care about the quality, can I quantify somehow your guys' balanced approach to AI, in using it wisely and being and playing the market, but then going, well, wait, when it comes to, actually understanding the ingredients and we've got these processes improving, and here's how we do that. And I think domain expertise is what's really going to cut through, and then we're going to have different industry ways of rating and understanding it, but it's got to be programmatic. So we've got to figure out how to do that with APIs, and then some of the other protocols and standards for helping us standardize how the agents and how the different apps and co-pilots and everything's doing it. So
Yeah, agreed. And it probably depends who you're building for, like who's your audience, who are the developers using your offering, your API offering. If it's just someone else vibe coding, it's probably fine. But if you work with heavily regulated businesses, with big corporates, if you possibly work with pharmaceutical companies, you need to ensure you have your checks and balances in place, to say the least. And you have a tight cybersecurity framework, et cetera. So all these things take time, they slow you down, and they don't come overnight. So what we've experienced is we're possibly still moving very slowly compared to many other, agentic solutions out there, very slow, but we're trying, to continue having a robust offering. We can't just vibe code something, put it out there, and then it's going to cause more harm than it's going to benefit anyone. So it's really a trade-off between speed and quality. I think that is,
yeah,
usually you work in a triangle between speed, quality, and cost. But in this instance, I would say it's really just speed and quality. That's the
yeah,
big balance. That if you have nothing to lose, hit the throttle, and
yeah.
go full steam ahead. But unfortunately, that's not us. We can't do that. But I know that many out there can, and therefore, I feel like that's part of the reason why we're seeing this massive influx in APIs out there as well.
Yeah. Cost, risk, and velocity are kind of the three pillars that I'm evaluating. And commercial coherence and clarity, I think, have they been around? Are they profitable? Do they have a clear, those are other things that I look at. And so the fast movers don't always show up well in those areas. So it's not just the technical details, are they doing it well? And it's the commercial side too. So I'll share. I'll do a deep dive and kind of like I said, a perspective of what you guys are doing, and share what I find, and see where there's gaps or maybe I'm missing something. But really looking at it through that agentic lens, and then that trying to understand how I can rate it and rank it and kind of go, okay, this is a pretty high quality API, but that's agent ready and AI ready, and has all that commercial clarity, the license, the legal side, the regulatory, the quality side as well. So I'll share that info over the next week or two. But I would say out of this, this I'll publish it on API Evangelist, the conversations. I'll write up another story from it, our conversation, or maybe a couple, because there's a couple in there that I think I would want to cover, is like the general success story of that. I talked to you guys before, where you guys are at, but I think the vibe coded app, I think the machine learning learnings over the years, I think there's probably several stories. And then I'll do a deep dive on what you guys offer again, and kind of give you guys feedback on that. And then maybe we can jump on again and talk through it and see what else we can find.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, would love to read that feedback, what you can find out, and what you can put together. That'd be so helpful and insightful, I'm sure. And that rating system you touched on earlier, that sounds really intriguing. I'd love to learn more about how this rating, works and can work at a global scale. Because I have not seen anything like it, to be honest. A thorough methodology of rating, comparing APIs, that would be of great value out there for the entire API community. So I would love to understand that better
Yeah.
and go through it.
Yeah, no, I'll share that because that app that you told me about, what's the one on GitHub? Was the name again? That open source GitHub one?
Sparky,
Sparky,
Sparky
yeah.
Fitness.
So I'm getting an influx of people building businesses similar to that. Some are more commercial, some are more open source, but they're like, oh, we're in apartment management for rentals. What are the best APIs that we can use? And they want that stack, and they want them kind of certified and then meet their needs. So I'm trying to make the rating system go for that. So it'd be like, in health, fitness and health, like I'll rate fatsecret and kind of, all right, here's the kind of stack you need when it comes to, you need this type of data, you need this type of data, and these resources, payments, and what's that sweet stack for the space. And that's what I want to be in the business of. I'm hoping I can translate and make some money and stay afloat and not have to go back to getting another job. So
Awesome. That sounds like a great plan. Yeah,
yeah,
very keen to learn more.
cool. Well, I appreciate you coming by, man. It was great to talk to you. I'm glad we could make our schedules align. Thanks for visiting us from the future. I'll share the stories. I'll share when the podcast goes up, and let's talk again. Come back and let's talk through it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Thanks so much for having
All
us
right.
on.
All right. See you later, Sebastian. Cheers.
Bye.